Check, check. Are we on yet? Five, four, three, two, 2, 1, 1 1/4. Hi, Sophia, Azam, ready, set, go. Transition. I'm having some issues with my camera tonight for some reason. I believe... hi, Sophia. Sophia's here. Welcome. Thanks for joining. Sorry for being late. I'm having some issues with the camera today. Why exactly, I have no idea. Welcome to the 66th episode of the Hagwon Startup podcast. Sorry, welcome to the 66th episode of the Korea podcast, formerly known as the Hagwon podcast, Hagwon Startup podcast. Today is the 1st of June, so welcome to the month of June. It is the 66th episode of this phenomenal podcast. My name is Jack. I am your host for tonight and every other night. And I am located in Ulsan, South Korea. The Korea podcast is a podcast that talks about anything and everything related to living and working in South Korea. We oftentimes talk about things like running your own business here in South Korea, and particularly Hagwons, which are language schools, and the smaller versions thereof, which are gombubangs. That's the intro. Let me just have a quick go at if I can fix the camera issue, because that's an odd one for some reason. Yes, video capture device. There may be too many or something of that sort. I have no idea what's happening here. It was good and then it crashed, and okay, I guess it's going to be a still image, unfortunately, which is sad, but maybe I can bring you some nice views. So anyway, in any range, the topic for today's unfortunate frozen camera was should language school teachers, particularly, well, should Hagwon teachers be paid more? I wanted to talk about that last time. I kind of touched on the topic briefly. Never got around to speaking about it because we were talking about, or I was talking about how to get a teaching job, or rather whether I should, or people should be coming to South Korea to teach English. And so there was another topic that I was talking about, and I never really had the time to talk about this particular topic on whether Hagwon teachers should be getting paid more money than they are right now. And the short answer of it is, well, actually there isn't one. Sorry. Yes and no. It would depend on a number of things, I would say. But I would like to talk about that in a little bit. First, I would like to start off by saying that there are okay, so over the past, I guess, 10 years, right? I came to Korea in 2005, and basically in 2005 my salary was 1.9 million won, which oftentimes in winter time, actually particularly during one winter time, it boiled down to 1.7 million won, because it cost about 200,000 won for me to pay the gas bills, and so it wasn't that great. The second year, this was my first year in South Korea. During the second year, I found another job and I got paid 2.1 million won. And as years progressed, it seems, when I look around now, it seems that the pay for Hagwon teachers here in South Korea has not increased dramatically. I guess the average income that is expected right now is anywhere between, I've seen ranges from between 2 to 2.5, 2.4, 2.5 for regular Hagwon jobs. If you work longer hours, you may be able to receive a pay of a little bit more than that, 2.6. I've also seen Hagwon jobs that pay in the vicinity of 3 million won. Those are very uncommon, and yeah, just very uncommon. I'm not sure when they occur at all. Here, let me transition to the chat window, because that's a little bit more sightly than my ugly mug spread across the screen. There are 3 people in the chat. Let me just have a look at it quickly and address those topics, that the questions that I've... Is it just me or the screen is actually frozen? No, it's frozen, Sophia. I have no idea what happened. The camera was working fine and it literally just froze right before I started. I just moved my laptop and it just died. So, sorry, I'm not mobile. You still get to see my ugly mug and hear my beautiful voice. But it's frozen and I don't want to fiddle around with... well, because I honestly, I don't know. I would have to turn off things and I can't process 2 streams of thoughts. I can't try to figure out the video. Let's see. Yeah, I have no idea what to do with the video, to be honest. Output. Video bitrate. That's not even it. My camera literally just turned off. So I assume it may be an old computer and it's a hardware issue here. So anyway, you can see the chat window. Maybe I can like switch over to the browser window. In any case, so yeah, so the Hagwon job that I saw that was paying somewhere in the vicinity of like 3 million won was, I think, strictly for teaching adults. And it just so happens that teaching adults, Hagwons that do teach adults exclusively, tend to, have a wider pay scale because adult lessons are a little bit more expensive than elementary school classes. Yeah, basically that's the reason. When we're talking about like middle school classes and high school classes, those Hagwons catering to that particular niche don't usually hire foreign teachers, native English speakers, because they don't need them. Like the Ipsi Hagwons or the cram schools that teach middle school or high schools, they prepare these students for exams. It's purely exam prep and they do not require native English speakers for that. The kids are taught out of book, and any Korean teacher with an average English ability will do the trick. So those Hagwons, I know, can be quite luxurious. If you are running a Hagwon like that, you could be making a killing. I know there is like Lucheta somewhere behind our Hagwon, and they're making, they're in the big leagues. They've got 40 classes of 40, 50 students, and they're making it big. I heard they make a lot of money. But they only hire, that's one teacher basically running one classroom of students, which means that the Hagwon owners get to keep most of their salaries, most of the income, while paying whatever is required to pay one teacher. Jason, so can you explain why the pay stagnated for the past 10 to 15 years, yet the cost of living and Hagwon payments have increased dramatically? I will try. So I don't know, I don't have a 100% bulletproof answer, but basically my view on this is such. While in the past, in 2005, Hagwons, basically there were no limitations, right? Hagwons were a new phenomenon in Korea. In the past, basically people were walking around. The way that English or any additional after-school classes were taught was done by teachers who would walk around private homes and would teach, out of their suitcase, so to speak. That still occurs, but to a much smaller extent. But prior to, I guess, 2005 or early 2000, late 1990s, this was the standard. Somewhere, I don't remember the exact date, but Hagwons are not a very, I think the first time Hagwons were opened was less than 20 years ago, to be honest. 18, maybe 19 years, somewhere around that number. And so once Hagwons became the trend, the fashion, there were no real oversights, economic or government oversights on how much money Hagwons could make. So Hagwons, going to a Hagwon back then was considered a prestigious thing. Parents would brag to their neighbors, saying that my kid is going to a Hagwon. My kid is being taught by a Westerner, they're learning English from a Westerner. And so the people that were being hired did not require to have any qualifications to speak of. I remember when I was first trying to apply for jobs here in South Korea in 2004, I was talking to a recruiter, and I was under the impression that I needed a bachelor's degree. Like, I needed to have graduated from university in order to apply for a job in Japan or Korea, or at least in Japan. But when I was applying for Korea, the recruiter flat out told me, no, don't worry about the bachelor's degree, just come down here, finish it up sometimes later, you can start your job prior to that. Which to me was, either this was a scam or it was really dead easy to come here. You didn't need to have a bachelor's degree. The government regulations were probably just requiring somebody from a native or from an English-speaking country and looking white enough to fit into the kind of mold of an English teacher, right? And that also meant that anybody and everybody could come here. And recruiters were paying stupid amounts of money. My friend came to Korea in 2002, and he was sold on the premise that he should come here to Korea, watch the World Cup, and then if he didn't like it, he could just go back home. The school paid for his flight, everything was provided. The situation, things changed once he arrived here, but the lure was here. And back then, Hagwons could charge anything they wanted. So parents would basically pay through their nose to get their children into a Hagwon. And Hagwons were not cheap, so it was a prestigious thing to send your child to a Hagwon, right? During those days, in my view, from not looking at it in this way, Hagwons would have been in a much better position to pay the teachers higher salaries than they were. Why it was chosen to have, I guess 2 million won back then was a lot of money. Oh, Sophia asks, don't mind me when I ask this question, but how is it like to live in Korea? Sophia, I'll get to it, okay? Because otherwise I'll lose my train of thought. I'll get to that question in a little bit. So back then, Hagwons were in a much better position to pay their teachers higher salaries because they were getting paid a lot more money. There was no oversight. Basically, Hagwons could charge for their classes whatever they wanted. And so I assume that they did. And so I assume that the Hagwon owners back then became fabulously rich, paid their, their English teacher-looking staff whatever was necessary to make them comfortable. I guess back then 2 million won. In 2005, my 1.9 million won was enough for me to live very comfortably. I was able to go out and eat 3 times a day, literally, go out party on the weekend, and still save close to half of my income. Okay, so getting paid 2 million won back then was plenty enough and it was probably a little bit above the average, income of the average employee here in South Korea. And so that would have been enough. Things changed, obviously, as Korea developed. It grew economically, expanded, and things became a lot more, living became a lot more expensive. Yet salaries haven't changed, and that's the pickle. That's what people always complain about. So a few years ago, the Korean government began instituting limitations, strict limitations on who could come to the country to teach, right? And so that they started implementing criminal record checks, background checks, and more recently, actually, no, yeah, that's it. For diplomas, that's more university level. It's a lot more difficult to get into universities right now than it used to be, but we're not talking about that. We're just talking about Hagwons. But yeah, so the government started implementing limitations on who could teach children in South Korea, not just any Joe of the street. And as basically as the ESL industry grew and became smarter in Korea, so did the parents. Like right now, we're looking at, when I teach, the children that we teach right now at our Hagwon, we have a very large base of the children whose parents are either doctors or lawyers or scientists or professors. So these are not working class people anymore, and most of them, or many of them at least, have either gone through the education system, the ESL education system here in South Korea. They've been through the Hagwon system, they've been through the route, or have studied abroad. So they're a lot more clued in and they're a lot more expectant. In addition to that, the government started implementing a few years back limitations on how much a Hagwon can charge per student, how many students there can be within a classroom, which is based on the classroom size, and overall the overall number of students within a Hagwon is based on a Hagwon, on the size of the Hagwon itself. So while in the past you could cram 20 students into a Hagwon classroom, like I used to teach in 2005, I used to teach classrooms full of students. I had maybe 12 to 15 students in one classroom, and I was teaching them English. Right now, I believe our classrooms are larger than the classrooms in which I used to teach, but we're only allowed to have a maximum of 10 students in a classroom. I'm not exactly sure whether the number is based on the number of teachers present in a classroom. As far as I understand it, the number of students that are allowed to be hosted in a classroom is based on the classroom, on the size of the classroom itself. And there is a maximum amount that you can charge per student coming into your Hagwon. And I don't remember exactly what it is, but it is limiting. So yeah, so that's the biggest obstacle. I think that kind of partially answers your question, Jason. In addition to that, well, really, that's it. In addition to that, the government implemented mandatory pension plans, which were not present in the past. It wasn't mandatory to pay into a pension, right? I don't remember what the policies were on health insurance back in the days, but I'm pretty sure that the wishy-washy health insurance that I received back in the days, I don't think my first Hagwon was actually paying into my health insurance, and I definitely don't think that they were paying into my pension plan. They said they were, but I don't think they were. Right now, the registration processes are a lot more strict, a lot more strict, and it's not as easy for Hagwons to sidestep their laws and regulations that are being implemented by the Office of Education and the MO. So, if you do the math and you have, for example, a certain number of students and you're only allowed to charge them a certain number of, a certain amount, then that leaves you with a maximum kind of income for any particular school. And if you manage, as a Hagwon owner, if you manage to scrape by and sidestep things and put things into the drawer, well, that's basically doing it illegally, right? There's certain ways, from what I understand, that Hagwon owners can sidestep, the fees and inflate their fees, but that's all done illegally, and you're running the risk of basically being shut down if that ever comes out. So basically it boils down to money. I guess they keep the wage the same to maintain their profits. Well, they keep the wage the same to stay afloat, not to maintain their profits. If we started paying people more, there would be no reason for running a Hagwon. What is operating a Hagwon is a lot of work. It's hard work. It's not like running a Gombubang. It's definitely nothing like doing private classes or freelancing. I hear oftentimes people compare Gombubangs to Hagwons. It's day and night. You're talking about a Gombubang, which is basically a business run out of your house. You've got one foreign teacher. You're allowed one foreign teacher, which would be, I guess, yourself or myself in that case, and a Korean staff, which would be my wife, who is not allowed to teach. They're simply there to kind of manage students. But it's run out of your house. There is no overhead expenses other than your rent, and that's it. For a Hagwon, there's so much more to do. There's so much more work. And then depending on the size of the Hagwon, if you increase the number of students, you need to increase the number of staff. If you increase the number of staff, your expenses increase. So having a larger Hagwon and paying people, increasingly more money, it basically cuts into your income, into your profits, which at certain point will render the business pointless. Because why would any business owner choose to run a business if they're not making more than they would be just working a regular job? That makes no sense, right? Yeah, that's basically it. So in a sense, yes, Jason, it's right. It always boils down to money. I mean, that's the whole point of running a business. There's no if, buts, or whys about it. There's no question about it, right? Nobody would run a business. Nobody would put themselves into the position of working their asses off for peanuts. I might as well get a job at a university, make my 2 million or 2.5 million won, not have to worry about pandemics or anything of that sort, and live a very comfortable life, and basically go back to teaching online when universities decide that they're allowed. As a Hagwon owner, you're not allowed that luxury. This is it's a risk that a Hagwon or any business owner takes because there is no safety nets. The only safety net that you have is yours. People talk, or there's talk about small business. I don't know. Government provides this or that amount for small businesses, which is really laughable. It's laughable. Literally, I think. For our school, we got less than 1 million won to support us for 2 months of being closed. It's pathetic. It's like it doesn't scrape the surface, doesn't begin to scrape the surface of the expenses that we incurred during those 2 months of closure. Okay, so yeah, absolutely, it boils down to money, and it boils down to the fact that business owners need to survive. And right now, with the limitations that the government implemented. On how much Hagwons can actually profit from tuitions, it makes it very difficult to increase salaries of teachers to a point that they would like, because at some point, like I said, it becomes unsustainable for a business to even exist. So that's basically the reason why. While Hagwons in the past could have paid more and should have paid more, they didn't, because it was a lot better to pocket, and the money that was being paid was plenty enough. Right now, in certain circumstances, it's not feasible, literally not feasible for Hagwon owners to pay more than they are because might as well close the doors and get a 9-to-5 job, because that'll be a lot less work, a lot less worries, and a lot more stability working for the men. But that is not what we choose. Yeah, so there you have it. And don't think that, as a Hagwon owner, we close doors, for example, and go home at 6 p.m. The first week after Corona, after we reopened, my wife and I, we have not seen our kids an entire week or longer, actually. We were here, we were at the Hagwon, we lived and breathed inside our Hagwon. We would come home, we would sleep, and then we would go back to the Hagwon. I would finish work at midnight, or sometimes 1 or 1:30. Then I would go home, I would sleep, I would wake up at whatever time, I think maybe 9. That was the luxury of not having the regular stable students that we have now. And then going back to work at 9 o'clock and start teaching at 10 and continue until whatever time, 6 or 7, and then doing all the other work that I needed to do in order to keep the business afloat. So it's not as peachy and not as rosy as you make it sound, Jason, to keep the wage the same, to maintain the profits. Yeah, the reason why the profits need to be maintained is because if they're not, then we can't pay the rent, we can't pay our employees, we can't put food on our table. For the first month, we were basically borrowing money from people while paying our drivers, our teachers, and paying our rent. And we had to borrow money from other people in order to buy food for ourselves. That was the situation, okay? Universities don't really need to struggle with that. So I totally understand, teachers who want better salaries. Just recently, I interviewed a teacher with a lot of experience and a really perfect candidate for our Hagwon. I really wanted to work with her, a fellow Canadian, but unfortunately, as she put it, our economic expectations did not align, and she wanted more than we basically could offer her at the moment, and so we didn't come to a happy arrangement, which is very unfortunate, but that's the reality, because like I said, at a certain point, things just become unmanageable, unfeasible financially. So yeah, so that's basically the reason for why salaries have remained the same. And I'm not saying that all Hagwons are like that, but I assume that majority of them are. If you are a large Hagwon and if you have a solid base, in addition to that, there's always the factor of competition. The competition between Hagwons, particularly in Okdong, like the area where we're located, it's hard. There's a lot of competition, and there is a limited number of customers. Customers kind of rotate between the Hagwons, come here, come there. But as a Hagwon owner, you have a number of students that is there 1 month, and the next month you're not really sure. You may have the same number, you may not. If you do something wrong that isn't to the liking of the customers, they will leave. And so there's always that stress of losing the clientele, and which makes it even worse. So having to pay high salaries, and then losing your customers, and then not being able to pay the salaries for your teachers, means that you would have to lay people off. So which would be worse, having to lay people off, or paying lower salaries and then being able to maintain to keep the staff on the payroll, right? Yes. That shall conclude, I think, my point on why the salaries have been kept as they are. And I think, in addition, like, teachers also always look at the base salary. When you look at the salary of a teacher's salary, you need to consider the additional expenses that a Hagwon incurs after the base salary. There's the base salary. There are the taxes, there is health insurance that needs to be paid, and there is the pension plan that needs to be paid. So overall, for a Hagwon, while the teacher may get paid 2.2, 2.3 million, the overall cost to a Hagwon is in the vicinity of 2.7, 2.8, sometimes even 3 million won. So, so this is, we're talking about, there's also Hagwons who pay for flight tickets. Well, flight tickets are another addition, another expense. The what you may call it, the 13th month, which is the severance pay. It's also an additional expense. Nobody really mentions that. Everybody forgets that. Where the severance pay is basically the 13th month that is, paid in a lump sum upon completing a 1-year contract. And when you divide that up, so let's say it's 2.2 million, or however much the person makes, that adds another 200,000 to the pay, right? Over the spread of a year. So a 2.2 salary becomes now 2.4 salary plus all the other expenses. Color chats say, so you're the problem. How do you mean? You're the man who doesn't pay the Hagwon teachers. No, I am the man who does pay the Hagwon teachers. Otherwise, teachers wouldn't be working for me if we were not paying them. You see. You're part of the system and the problem. Well, I guess, I could remove myself from the system and allow the teachers to not work, and I guess the problem will be solved. I would be out of a job, and the teachers would be out of a job, and nobody would be complaining, right? Sophia, to answer your earlier question, what is it like to live in South Korea? Do you have a specific question? I don't know. How to approach that answer, or that question rather. It's got its goods and bads. I find that every country has things that are great about living in it, and there's some that are horrible. There are things that I love about Canada, and there are things that I don't. Like I would prefer not to have to go through another Winnipeg winter. Some people survive. I have for many years, and now that I've been away for over a decade. Thinking about having to go back into another Winnipeg winter, man, sends shivers down my spine. Even my mother, who's been living there for over 20-something years, is complaining. Like she's done with it. So yeah, I miss Canada. I miss so many things about it. One thing I don't miss are the Winnipeg winters, because they're harsh. They're hard. In Korea, there are some things that are fantastic. Obviously, like the first thing that I would say is how Korea deals with situations of crisis, right? Like in the more recent past, the Corona thingy-majig, I guess it's been dealt with quite well, and so that's good. Korea is a well-established, economically well-established country. The economy here has been suffering of lately. It's not the best. It's not as great as what it used to be, but we're living. We're making a living, and it's good. Cooker chat says your Hagwon is a franchise. Yes, you just work for your corporate overlords. No, not really. We're the Korea franchise, so it's our franchise here. It's a branch of a franchise, but it's our franchise. I don't work for the corporate overlords. I work for us. We purchased the franchise, and we're working for us. So no, you're absolutely inaccurate on that one. Going back to your question, Sophia. Summer, yeah. Well, I don't know. Weather is good. The only problem that I find in Korea, everything. So Korea is very convenient. Everything you can buy things anywhere. You can buy anything you really need, you want. As an expat here, there's a lot of comfort food now. you go to, there's Costco for Pete's sake, and you can get anything and everything you want in Costco that you would get back home in a Western country. There's a lot of Eastern restaurants. You can find food from from Nepal, from India, and many other parts of the world. If you're a beer drinker, there's a lot of great beer. Even Korea started making some good beer. So yeah, it's a place of convenience. Hospital health insurance is quite inexpensive. It's readily available. One of the reasons why we came back to Korea with my wife was because when we were living in England, and my wife was pregnant, we were going to hospitals for ultrasounds, and they were spread out throughout months. We were not able to go anytime we wanted. We had to wait for appointments and yada yada. Coming back to Korea, basically you can walk into a hospital at any time, pay a small fee, and you get treated, right? There is no waiting. I always found the Korean health system to be like a happy medium between free Canadian healthcare, which is heavily taxed. The Canadian living is heavily taxed, versus the healthcare in the States, which is heavily overpriced. Korea has kind of a happy medium where you pay into the system, you still pay taxes. They're not as crazily high as they are in Canada, and then your healthcare is relatively manageable. It's not too expensive. Some of the things that I don't like about Korea is the air. The air kind of sucks here, particularly in summer. There are occasions when, forget Corona, you gotta wear a mask because the air you breathe in will freaking slowly kill you, right? So, yeah, that sucks. What else? I don't know. Traffic on the roads is horrible. People are horrible at driving. Drivers are just nasty. Yeah, that'll probably never change. Traffic gets super dense. Korea is a pretty small country with a very large population, and it's hard to get around places during times of festivities. If there's festivals or whatever, you're better off staying at home than jumping into your car, because a journey that normally takes an hour will turn into a 3 or 4 hour trip. So that's horrendous. Cooker chat says, you pay franchisee fees to your parent company and they only care about profit, not educating students. Well, yes, I pay franchising fees to them, but they don't have any oversight over me and what I do. So the education that I provide to my student is my education. I decide how and where to worry about my students. And there is no limits. There is no expectations from my overlords. There is no caps. And I'm the one who decides what and where this happens. So you may be thinking of corporate setups. Maybe this is what's done in Cheongdam. I have no idea, but Shano Hagwon does not function like that. Okay, it's a very different system. It's not. We basically we do pay attention to our students. We put our students first. Not our profits, but our students. If we were, putting profits first, I would tell my wife, you know what? Screw all this having to work so hard. Hire a bunch of people. Let's go on vacation while the business runs itself. That's not the case, my friend. Both my wife and I work our asses off. We've been working at this Hagwon for the past 4 years, from morning till dawn, not seeing my kids, investing time and energy into training our teachers, into providing our students with the best education, the English ESL education that they can get, trying to make everybody happy, mostly the students, while the parents complain that this is not enough and that's not enough, and having to deal with parental crap on a regular basis, and yet we continue. So now you can minimize it and boil it down, or put it into your bracket of expectations or understanding, but that doesn't really it doesn't really present the reality of what is happening. That is just your reality of what you think happens, but it's not actually the real reality. Hagwon teachers get paid so low, students don't learn. You're the middleman who is part of the problem. No, again, I am not the middleman. Basically, you would need to know a lot more about a business structure in order to make that kind of judgment. And I guess you have absolutely no idea about how businesses function, particularly franchises, other than what you've been taught on TV. And Hagwon teachers, there are good quality Hagwon teachers, and there are some that are questionably so. And you hear of those, both of them, time and time again. Some I am able to talk with. I've talked with some, yeah, right now we've got people who are working for us, fantastic teachers, yeah, what else can I say? I'm the middleman who's a part of a problem. Well, how would you fix that then? Charts? How would you fix the problem of the middleman? Franchisees are the poison of capitalism. Corporate does the branding. That's interesting. You pay the fees no matter if you make a profit or not. No. Well, again, see, like I said, you don't know what you're talking about. Sophia, I know I say this every time, but I need to go to sleep. I will see this tomorrow. Okay, Sophia, have a good night. We'll talk to you tomorrow. So I think I can keep the profits, but the corporations are smarter than you. What? I'm sorry. What are you talking about? They know the economy is unstable. Yeah. Okay. I'm waiting for more. What's coming? So you keep suffering economically. Well, you're working on a presumption that the franchisee fees are so drastically overwhelming that I'm not able to make a living because of the franchisee fees. And that is absolutely, wrong. And like I said, you have no idea what you're talking about. This may be the case with large franchises like Starbucks or whatever other franchisees. I've seen it time and time again, and I've heard it time and time again, that people open franchises and they close down because they don't want to pay the fees. It's true. For us, believe me, the fees that we pay are minuscule, and they're very manageable, and they're not on an ongoing basis in a sense that you make it sound. So really, the fees that we pay are the last of our concerns, the smallest of our concerns, really. The bigger concern that we have is having forcibly to shut down schools in order to satisfy the demands of a government who sees fit to, just shut people down. And I guess in some cases it's necessary, like we just had the outbreak of the coronavirus allegedly, and things had to be remedied, and they were, and for that we suffer. But believe you me, our corporate overlords have nothing to do with that. Corporate overlords. Yeah, maybe in a different world, sure. Starbucks is not a franchise? Really? Interesting. See, I don't know what shows you watch, but okay. Alrighty. That's it. That's it. I'm gonna leave this because I don't want to. This is 44 minutes. I was hoping to keep it at 30 minutes. So that's it. I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna leave cooler chats with his thoughts and suffering, and my suffering, my economic suffering based on my as a result of my corporate overlords. Oh goodness, the corporate overlords. But yeah, Thanks all for tuning in, for those who were here, and thank you to Sophia for coming in. Thanks, Jason, and thank you, Cooler Chats, for your input. If you're new here, if you're watching this show after its recording, my apologies again for the frozen picture. I have no idea. I'm glad that the picture is even there and the chat's working. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. And we'll see you in the next one next week. I'm hoping maybe to be able to get somebody back on the chat and have a nice little chat about, I don't know, we'll see what about. Alrighty, everybody have a good remainder of the week, and we'll see you in the next one. Doodles!